When most people imagine cowboys, they picture gunfights at high noon, heroic horsemen galloping across pristine landscapes, and rugged individualists answering to no one. The Hollywood cowboy is a romantic figure, free, brave, and perpetually ready for adventure. The reality of cowboy life during the cattle drive era, roughly 1865 to 1890, was starkly different. Cowboys were poorly paid laborers doing one of the most physically demanding and monotonous jobs in America. They worked 15-hour days, slept on the ground, ate the same bland food for months, and ranked near the bottom of the social hierarchy. Let's examine what an actual day looked like for a cowboy on a cattle drive from Texas to Kansas in the 1870s. The day started around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning when the cook, universally known as Cookie, began yelling for the men to wake up. There was no gentle rise to greet the day. Cowboys slept on bedrolls, simple mattresses made from canvas or tarpaulin stuffed with whatever materials were available. These bedrolls provided minimal comfort and no protection from the cold, damp ground. After months on the trail, most cowboys suffered from chronic back problems and body aches that never fully went away. Sleep was already in short supply. Every cowboy except the trail boss, the cook, and the horse wrangler had to stand night guard, riding circles around the herd for 2-hour shifts. One cowboy who worked cattle drives in the 1870s later recalled that sleep deprivation was the worst hardship they faced. On a good night, a cowboy might get 5 hours of sleep. When conditions were bad, storms, restless cattle, potential stampedes, they were lucky to sleep an hour. The breakfast itself was rushed and utilitarian. Coffee was the most important item, strong and black, brewed in massive pots over the campfire. The food was equally basic: fried salt pork or bacon, sourdough biscuits covered in pan gravy made from bacon grease and flour, and sometimes leftover beans from the previous night. This wasn't breakfast designed for enjoyment. It was fuel, pure and simple, intended to provide enough calories to get through a morning of hard physical labor. Once breakfast was finished, the real work began. The primary job of a cattle drive was straightforward: move a herd of 2,000 to 3,000 Texas longhorns from southern Texas to railroad towns in Kansas, a distance of roughly 600 miles. This journey typically took 3 months. The work required coordination, constant vigilance, and physical endurance that most modern people would find incomprehensible. The herd was organized in a specific formation. The trail boss rode ahead, scouting the route and looking for water sources. Behind him came the most experienced cowboys, riding point at the front of the herd. These positions were prestigious because the dust wasn't as bad. Junior cowboys rode drag at the rear, which was by far the worst assignment. The dust kicked up by thousands of hooves was so thick that it coated men like fur. Despite the bandanas cowboys wore over their faces, they would cough up dirty phlegm for weeks after a drive ended. A typical day involved moving the herd 10 to 15 miles. This doesn't sound like much, but controlling thousands of unpredictable longhorn cattle across varying terrain was exhausting work. These weren't docile animals. Texas longhorns were semi-wild, unruly, and genuinely dangerous. Their horns could span 6 feet or more. Cowboys constantly had to retrieve strays, prevent the herd from scattering, and watch for signs that the cattle might stampede. Hours in the saddle caused blisters and chronic back problems. Around midday, the herd would be allowed to stop and graze while the cowboys rotated through a quick meal. The cook drove the chuck wagon ahead to a predetermined location and had food ready when cowboys arrived in shifts. Lunch was even more basic than breakfast, usually just more biscuits, perhaps some beans and coffee. Cowboys ate quickly because the herd couldn't be left unattended for long. The chuck wagon itself was the mobile kitchen that made cattle drives possible. Invented by cattleman Charles Goodnight in 1866, it was a converted army wagon equipped with storage compartments for supplies. There was strict etiquette around the chuck wagon. Never tie your horse to it because the dust would contaminate the food. The cook was the absolute boss of the wagon area, and nobody questioned his authority. You came to meals with clean hands, ate first and talked later, and never complained about the food. After the brief midday break, the afternoon shift was more of the same. Cowboys guided the herd forward, dealt with strays, and tried to keep the cattle moving in roughly the right direction. The work was monotonous but required constant attention. A moment of inattention could result in a stampede, and stampedes were the cowboys' greatest fear. When thousands of cattle panicked and ran, they could trample anything in their path, including cowboys. Environmental conditions made everything harder. In summer, the heat was brutal. Cowboys worked under a blazing sun with no shade and limited water. In spring and fall, rainstorms turned trails into muddy nightmares. Cowboys had to guide cattle across swollen rivers where both animals and men could easily drown. There was no shelter, no respite from the weather. The racial and ethnic diversity of cattle drive crews is often overlooked. Estimates suggest that roughly a quarter to a third of all cowboys between 1867 and 1887 were African American, Mexican American, or American Indian. Many black cowboys were formerly enslaved people who found more freedom on the open range than they would have as sharecroppers. Mexican vaqueros brought extensive ranching knowledge and influenced cowboy culture significantly. Despite their skills and contributions, non-white cowboys faced discrimination and were rarely promoted to positions like trail boss. As the sun began to set, the herd would be moved to a bedding ground where the cattle would settle for the night. This process required care and patience. Once the cattle were settled, supper could begin. The evening meal was the most substantial of the day. The core of cowboy cuisine was beans, often called whistleberries for obvious digestive reasons. Beans were slow cooked for hours, sometimes with molasses added for flavor. There would be more biscuits, more salt pork or bacon, and occasionally beef jerky. Fresh beef was actually uncommon on cattle drives because the cattle represented the rancher's product. The diet was high in calories and protein, but monotonous to the point of torture. After 3 months of beans, biscuits, salt pork, and coffee, cowboys would be desperate for anything different. After supper, the night guard began. Cowboys worked in rotating shifts, usually 2 hours at a time. The night watch was critical because cattle were prone to stampeding at night, particularly during thunderstorms. Cowboys rode slowly around the herd, watching for signs of restlessness. To keep the cattle calm, cowboys sang. This practice was so common that it became one of the defining elements of cowboy culture. These trail songs are the foundation of modern cowboy music. Singing to cattle might sound romantic, but the reality was a man exhausted from 15 hours of work, riding circles in the dark, trying to stay awake by singing the same songs repeatedly. Cowboys judged their shifts by the position of the Big Dipper constellation in the night sky. The daily routine varied little over the course of a 3-month drive. Wake before dawn, eat bland food, ride all day in dust or mud, eat more bland food, stand night guard, sleep a few hours on the ground, and repeat. The work was dangerous, the pay was terrible, and the social status was low. Cowboys earned between $25 and $40 per month, which was barely enough to live on. When cattle drives finally reached their destination, the cattle were sold and loaded onto trains. Cowboys would finally get paid, and after months of deprivation, they would descend on the town's saloons, brothels, and gambling halls. Cowboys would drink, gamble, bathe, buy new clothes, and blow through months of wages in a matter of days. The era of the great cattle drives was remarkably brief. By the late 1880s, railroads had extended into Texas, eliminating the need for long drives. Barbed wire allowed farmers to fence their property, ending the open range. A brutal winter in 1886 to 1887 killed massive numbers of cattle and bankrupted many ranchers. By 1890, the classic cattle drive was essentially over. Most cowboys came from the lowest social classes. They turned to cowboy work because it was available, and because, despite its hardships, it offered something that other low-wage labor didn't: a degree of freedom and the chance to work outdoors. Understanding cowboy life requires stripping away the mythology. These weren't heroes or adventurers. They were working-class men doing a difficult, dirty, dangerous job for poor pay. The work was mostly boring, occasionally terrifying, and physically destructive. The food was awful, the sleeping conditions were miserable, and the social status was low. The romantic image of the cowboy emerged almost immediately after the cattle drive era ended, fueled by dime novels and eventually Hollywood films. But that romantic cowboy, the lone hero riding into the sunset, bore little resemblance to the sleep-deprived, dust-covered, poorly paid ranch hand who actually worked cattle drives. That's the unvarnished reality of cowboy life. Drop a comment with another historical profession or period you want stripped of its Hollywood polish. Subscribe for more deep dives into how people actually lived throughout history.